My first day at a new job. The morning air carried that peculiar tension between anticipation and dread as I adjusted my tie for the third time. My reflection in the hallway mirror betrayed the carefully constructed facade. The crisp navy suit couldn't quite mask the nervous energy coursing through me. Today wasn't merely about starting a job. It was about proving I belonged in that rarefied world of glass towers and polished professionalism, where first impressions crystallize into lasting perceptions. The weight of my own expectations felt nearly as burdensome as those I imagined my new colleagues might have, the unspoken pressure to immediately demonstrate worth, to seamlessly assimilate, to perform competence, before I even learned where the coffee machine was located. Stepping through the revolving doors, I was immediately struck by the cathedral-like silence of the corporate lobby, stark contrast to the bustling street outside. The reception desk gleamed with cold precision, its angular lines reflecting the company's minimalist aesthetic. A security guard's practiced nod directed me to a waiting area where the chairs were artfully uncomfortable, designed for transient occupancy. Nearby, a woman in a tailored blazer spoke in hushed, urgent tones into her headset, her French manicure tapping impatiently against her tablet. The air carried the faint citrus of expensive cleaning products, undercut with something more organic, the collective pheromones of ambition and caffeine. When the receptionist finally slid my temporary badge across the counter, the plastic still warm from the printer, I noticed how her smile never quite reached her eyes, the professional detachment of someone who'd processed hundreds of anxious new hires before me. The deeper I moved into the office labyrinth, the more I became aware of the invisible architecture of power, the subtle choreography of who spoke first in meetings, whose interruptions were tolerated, and whose ideas were met with thoughtful nods versus polite indifference. A junior analyst's hesitant suggestion was brushed aside, only to be celebrated moments later when echoed by a senior director. I watched, fascinated and unnerved, as the room's attention shifted like wind patterns predictable only to those who had learned to read the signs. Then came the acronyms. They peppered conversations like insider code, each one a tiny barrier to entry. "We'll need to sync with PMO after the caber," someone said, and I nodded as if the string of letters carried obvious meaning. My notebook filled with frantic scribbles, half definitions, half questions I was too self-conscious to ask. The fear of revealing ignorance felt more paralyzing than the ignorance itself. Even the kitchenette had its own social ecosystem. The way people clustered, who lingered for casual chat, who grabbed their coffee and retreated, mapped unspoken alliances and rivalries. When I reached for the wrong mug, apparently his mug, the brief chill in the air taught me more about territorial norms than any employee handbook could. Lunch was its own minefield. The invitation never came, so I hovered near a group heading out, hoping to be absorbed into the migration. Their conversation flowed effortlessly: weekend plans, a client's unreasonable demands, an inside joke about Greg from accounting. I laughed a beat too late at the punchline, my voice joining the chorus just as the moment passed. By mid-afternoon, I realized competence here wasn't just about skills, it was about deciphering the hidden lexicon of belonging. Every interaction was a test I hadn't known to study for. The work itself? That would come later. First, I had to learn how to exist in this ecosystem without setting off silent alarms. It happened unexpectedly, a fleeting exchange near the malfunctioning printer, of all places. As I wrestled with paper jams and error messages, a sigh escaped me, barely audible. Trial by fire, came a dry voice beside me. A woman with sharp green glasses, someone from the design team, I'd later learn, leaned against the copier, watching my struggle with amused recognition. The real onboarding test isn't the orientation slides. It's surviving this ancient relic. Something about her tone, neither pitying nor performative, just genuinely wry, cut through the day's tension. When I joked about the printer being the true gatekeeper of corporate worth, she laughed, and for the first time that day, I didn't feel like an imposter. She introduced herself as Clara, then casually mentioned a podcast we both followed, an obscure series about architectural history. That tiny shared reference became an anchor in the sea of unfamiliarity. Later, in a meeting where I'd been silently rehearsing whether to speak, Clara deliberately turned to me. "You've worked with these analytics platforms before, right?" The invitation was seamless, giving me an entry point without spotlighting my newness. Her subtle gesture taught me more about workplace allyship than any mentorship program could. That evening, as I packed up, Clara stopped by my desk. "Survived day one," she said, handing me a sticky note with the printer's secret override code. Pro tip: this gets you through the first month. It wasn't just the code that mattered, it was the unspoken message. I see you figuring this out. Keep going. The fluorescent hum of the office had faded into evening gloom by the time I processed the day's lessons. What struck me most wasn't the technical complexity of the work that was manageable, but the intricate social ecosystem I need to decode. True integration, realized, required more than competence. It demanded a kind of cultural fluency that no employee handbook could teach. I began to see the unspoken rules for what they were, not arbitrary barriers, but the evolved language of a collective navigating shared space. The careful choreography of interruptions and meetings, the territorial claims on coffee mugs, even the precise timing of lunch departures, each was a subtle dialect in the workplace lexicon. My initial frustration gave way to fascination. This wasn't about conformity, but about learning to read the room well enough to know when to blend in and when to stand out. The printer incident with Clara revealed a deeper truth: that vulnerability, when met with genuine reciprocity, could bridge the gap between outsider and colleague faster than any display of expertise. In resisting the urge to project perfect competence, I accidentally stumbled upon the most valuable first-day lesson: belonging begins the moment you stop performing and start participating. As I gathered my things, I noticed how the office transformed at night, the stripped-down skeleton of a space that by day pulsed with human drama. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but the paralyzing uncertainty had lifted. I wasn't fluent in this culture yet, but I'd learned the most important phrase: "I'm still learning." And that, it turned out, was enough. Stepping into the elevator at day's end, I caught my reflection in the polished steel, slightly rumpled, but undeniably changed. The nervous energy of the morning had metabolized into something quieter, more durable. I recognized now that initiation rituals are rarely about the obvious tests. They unfold in the interstices: the shared eye roll over malfunctioning equipment, the unspoken permission to ask stupid questions, the gradual mapping of power currents beneath polite small talk. The elevator doors opened to the lobby, now empty save for the night. Cleaner's rhythmic sweeping. His nod as I passed held neither the receptionist's practiced neutrality nor my colleague's assessing glances, just the quiet acknowledgement of someone who'd witnessed countless first days unfold and fade into ordinary Tuesdays. It was oddly comforting. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Not just mastering tasks, but learning when to assimilate and when to push back, how to balance professionalism with authenticity. As I stepped into the cooling night air, I realized this wasn't an ending but a threshold. The first day's baptism by printer jam and acronym fire had stripped away my illusions of immediate mastery, replacing them with something more valuable: the understanding that belonging isn't granted, but woven one deliberate interaction at a time. The badge around my neck still felt foreign, but no longer like a costume. It was becoming part of my silhouette, as with the rhythms of this place in time. I allowed myself one last look at the glowing office windows stacked like lit filing cabinets in the dark. Somewhere up there my empty desk waited. Tomorrow, we'd begin again.